scared away a little.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios here in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Adam Keller. My co-host and fellow agitator Jacob Morrison is out today, so we've got a big show. We've got a big show planned today. Painters Union President Jimmy Williams talks about the election and what's coming up next for his union and union folks across the country. We also have some big news out of the UAW, all that and more on today's Valley Labor Report. If you want to be part of the program today, we've got a phone number. The line will be open during overtime, so that'll be coming up in about 90 minutes. You can call 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week. We have a voicemail to play on today's show. We love the voicemails, folks. And just going to put this out there. You don't have to use your real name. If you want to call and leave a voicemail and you're concerned about, revealing your identity, I'm not going to know. Jacob's not going to know. So feel free. Leave us a voicemail. 844-899-TVLR. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us pretty much anywhere you find anything online. You can go to our website, tvlr.fm, but we're also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcast, all at the Valley Labor Report. And just a reminder, your support keeps us on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining member of the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/the Valley Labor Report. We've got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. We've got our logo dad cap, some of our Join a Union tees are left, and we also have pre-orders open for union-made matchbooks and a new t-shirt. All of that at tvlr.fm/store. And of course, all of our merch is union-made here in the United States. And folks, if you're on our email list, you know that we are in the middle of a fundraising drive. We have a goal of $10,000, and I know that sounds like a lot, but that is about what we need to get out of this drive. We are looking to raise some funds to support this project and to grow this project. It does cost money to do what we do. Our expenses between studio rental, labor, and radio airtime are about $5,000 per month. So if we can raise $10,000, that would help us be a little bit less reliant on sponsors. Our single biggest source of funding does come from our listeners, folks like you who chip in, $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, whatever you can afford. But we also do sell advertising, as you hear in the program every week. So if you have funds, please do contribute to the campaign at tvlr.fm/union2024. And if you don't have the funds, please share the link, share our work, share the fundraiser, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really does help and make a difference. And as I mentioned, we do sell advertising space on the show, mostly to labor unions, but to union-friendly businesses, law firms, nonprofits, media outfits. If you're interested in advertising to our audience, please do let us know. And if you're a member of a union, you should get your local to sponsor the show, or your labor council, or your state federation. We'd love that. Just reach out to us for more details. And let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. And we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. So if you're interested in more shows that cover labor unions, if you're interested in more content like this, you can check out the Labor Radio Podcast Network. Proud to be a member of that. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard union brothers who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So I really want to thank everyone for tuning in today. Whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. And as you can tell, today's show is going to be a little bit different. Our fearless leader, Jacob Morrison, is out this weekend. So I am holding it down here in the studio with Jeff and Ben behind the scenes. Really appreciate their support. Hopefully it will be a good experience for everyone. I will do my best. I am not normally the one out front on the Valley Labor Report. Regular listeners know that I tend to let Jacob do most of the talking. I've been pretty quiet lately, but I'll be holding it down today. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about, and I look forward to hearing from folks later in overtime as well. But we're going to get started with Last Week in Southern Labor. This is something that we do every week. I think it is a valuable segment. Basically, we report on what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to throughout the last week. So that's new union organizing, updates on union campaigns, some political updates as well, internal union affairs, any of that kind of stuff. We also put this out as a newsletter, so you can subscribe on our website at tvlr.fm. And let's get started. 123 workers at Capital Area Food Bank in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with the Washington Baltimore News Guild, CWA, Local 32035. 25 workers at Entergy in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 605. 80 workers at Unity Healthcare in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with 1199 Service Employees International Union, SEIU, United Healthcare Workers East. And this one I'm really excited to see. I was thrilled to see this on the NLRB website this week. 22 workers at PetSmart in Midland, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 540. Really love to see that. Hope that spreads. I know there are a lot of PetSmarts in a lot of communities throughout the country and here in the South. 2 workers at the Delaware Resource Group of Oklahoma and Cherry Point, North Carolina, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Marine Air Crew Group Association. 68 workers at a refining company in Lake Charles, Louisiana, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 407. 3 workers at Rental Supply District in District 1 in Ashland, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with an unnamed union. 18 workers at Starbucks in Roswell, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. 72 workers at Upper Cumberland Electric Membership Cooperative in Carthage, Tennessee, filed a petition to hold a union election with IBEW Local 429. 8 workers at OQ Chemical in Bay City, Texas, filed a petition for a union election with IUOE Local 564. 175 workers at Highland Warren in Glendale, West Virginia, filed a petition for a union election with Teamsters Local 697. 10 workers at Texas Public Radio in San Antonio, Texas, filed a petition for a union election with SAG-AFTRA. And we'll talk more about this later, but a supermajority of the 1,000 workers at the Blue Oval SK battery manufacturing plant in Glendale, Kentucky, signed union authorization cards and launched a public campaign to join the United Auto Workers, UAW. Moving on to campaign updates. In August, a supermajority of lead attendants and onboard attendants on Brightline's Orlando to Miami line filed a petition with the National Mediation Board, which is the administrator of the Railway Labor Act, to unionize with the Transport Workers Union, TWU. In response, the rail line hired an anti-union law firm that said the election should take place with the National Labor Relations Board under the auspices of the National Labor Relations Act. TWU disagreed, and the National Mediation Board sided with the union, TWU, and has directed an election to take place. Moving on to election results, 29 workers at Starbucks in Dunwoody, Georgia voted 6-12 against unionization with Starbucks Workers United, a rare loss there in that campaign. 5 workers at Kinder Morgan in Texas City, Texas voted 0-3 in favor of decertifying IUOE Local 564 as their union. 128 workers at Professional Contract Services in Fort Knox, Kentucky voted 94-9 in favor of unionization with IBEW Local 369. Big win there. 973 workers at George Washington University voted 347-2 in favor of unionization with SEIU Local 500. Another huge win there. And 18 workers at United Natural Foods in Sarasota, Florida voted 13-3 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 79, as did 265 more in a different unit in the same city with a vote of 187-38. And finally, 9 workers at Carrollton Railroad in Carrollton, Kentucky voted unanimously in favor of unionization with the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, BLET, which is a Teamsters affiliate. Moving on to strikes and bargaining, Wells Fargo Workers United began bargaining for a contract to cover all 22 union-represented branches in 14 states last week, and I'm really proud to say that that includes Alabama. That's right. The Wells Fargo branch in Anniston, Alabama, recently unionized with CWA. Workers at ZeniMax Studios, which is a video game company in Maryland and Texas, walked off the job in a one-day strike to protest lack of movement at the bargaining table. The Sheet, Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers Union, SMART, is calling attention to the potentially deadly impact of Amtrak's cost-cutting measures, highlighting how one member was alone when his train was struck by a vehicle, leaving him to try to save multiple lives by himself. Workers who make the AFL-CIO run are protesting management's decision to unfreeze their own pensions while maintaining a freeze on the staff's. Jacksonville State University here in Alabama has announced a new compensation plan that includes a 10% pay increase after pressure from the newly formed United Campus Workers chapter among campus workers, but the union says it's not good enough, with the lowest wages on campus still being only a little above $8 an hour, and a cleaner who has worked there for 10 years only making $13 an hour after the raise. In political and legislative updates, the United States Department of Labor announced the release of new research it commissioned from the Urban Institute that found a national paid family and medical leave program would reduce poverty across all communities and diminish the poverty gap among workers, especially Black and Hispanic workers who experience some of the highest poverty rates. Relatedly, another study also funded by the U.S. Department of Labor recently found that childcare costs more than rent for many families. Specifically, the median cost of center-based infant care is higher than the median cost of rent. The United States Department of Labor also recognized the 10th annual National Apprenticeship Week, something that many building trades union leaders are concerned about coming under attack during the upcoming Trump administration. And I know that's something that Jacob talked with IUPAT President Jimmy Williams about in the interview we'll be playing here shortly. Speaking of the Department of Labor, Trump has yet to announce his pick for that agency yet. I'm volunteering myself, just putting it out there. If they want to hit me up, I'd be interested. I'd at least take the call. The Teamsters president, Sean O'Brien, is publicly lobbying for Republican Congressperson Lori Chavez DeRemer, one of only 3 Republicans to support the Protecting the Right to Organize PRO Act. And so that's who Teamsters President Sean O'Brien is backing for the position. We'll stay tuned on who actually gets named for that position. Donald Trump did announce that Linda McMahon is his pick for leading the U.S. Department of Education. Folks my age may remember her from wrestling. That's right. Back when it was called WWF, the World Wrestling Federation. She was on the TV back in the day, in the 90s and 2000s. So she's been picked to lead the United States Department of Education, and education unions are expressing some skepticism. Big shocker there. While American Federation of Teachers President, AFT President Randy Weingarten said that, quote, "We will try to work with anyone who puts the aspirations of our students, families, and communities first," and, quote, "We look forward to learning more about Linda McMahon, and if she is confirmed, we will reach out to her as we did with Betsy DeVos at the beginning of her tenure." She also said that, quote, "We question the future of these popular ideas like project-based instruction, career and technical education, and apprenticeships, and more if the Trump administration follows through with plans to close the Department of Education, leaving in doubt a federal funding lifeline that disproportionately goes to children in need, children with disabilities, and young adults who were the first in their families to go to college." Becky Pringle, president of the NEA, the National Education Association, was less optimistic in her statement, saying, quote, "By selecting Linda McMahon, Donald Trump is showing that he could not care less about our students' futures. Rather than working to strengthen public schools, expand learning opportunities for students, and support educators, McMahon's only mission is to eliminate the Department of Education and take away taxpayer dollars from public schools, where 90% of students and 95% of students with disabilities learn, and give them to unaccountable and discriminatory private schools." Speaking of teachers, a new RAND report found that higher teacher pay improved teacher retention. Wow. Can you imagine that? And it turns out that states with collective bargaining rights for teachers had higher pay. Another shocker there. No surprise, the AFT lauded the report. Federal employee unions are urging the Senate to pass the Social Security Fairness Act, which has passed the House and fixes the problem of Social Security payments being reduced for government workers who have pensions. SEIU is attacking Trump's pick for HHS, RFK Jr., saying he will, quote, "put lives at risk." One of the biggest things that the Senate can do to help workers before the Trump administration comes in is to reconfirm Lauren McFerrin to the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, to ensure a Democratic appointee majority on the board until 2026. Unions are pressuring the Senate to act. The U.S. House passed a bill that would allow the Treasury Secretary to revoke nonprofit status from organizations it alleges support terrorism. Importantly, it would allow the Treasury Secretary to do this without guidelines from Congress, without due process for the nonprofit, and without even explaining its reasoning. The News Guild, which represents many workers and nonprofits, opposes the bill and has put out an action alert. The Associated Builders and Contractors, ABC, an explicitly anti-union construction trade group, is applauding the decision of a Trump-appointed judge to overturn a Biden administration Department of Labor rule that would have qualified millions more workers for overtime protections. Fascinatingly, they referred to businesses as the, quote, "the regulated community," Interesting. I guess they forget workers are also regulated. I don't know. In internal union affairs, unions across the construction and manufacturing industries are celebrating National Apprenticeship Week, highlighting their programs and testimonies from their apprentices. The Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers Union, SMART Local 5, built 30 beds for children who need a safe place to sleep in Bradley County, Tennessee. Love to see that kind of community service from our unions. If your union has been doing some cool community service, especially here with the holidays coming up, do let us know. Anything that we missed, and I'm sure we missed a lot, please do let us know. tvlr.fm/contact. You can also, again, subscribe to this as a newsletter, get it in your inbox every week. And folks, I got to tell you, there's not a lot of people putting this information together. And if you're interested in following what's happening with our labor movement here in the South, please do subscribe, tvlr.fm. And that's it for Last Week in Southern Labor. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Jacob's interview of IUPAT President Jimmy Williams.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, You need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law.
You need attorneys always available to take care of you.
Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law.
And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case.
Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Adam Keller. Our fearless leader, Jacob Morrison, is out this weekend, so I'm flying solo, but not entirely solo. Thanks to Ben and Jeff in the studio. Really appreciate their support. If you want to give us a call later, 844-899-TVLR. That's our number. We'll have the lines open during overtime. Have a real quick international story before we transition to the interview with IUPAT President Jimmy Williams. Really looking forward to that. I wanted to give an update on our British miners that we have talked to over the years. You may recall, the longtime listeners, we've talked a little bit about the Orgrave Truth and Justice campaign. And they had a really positive meeting over in Britain with the Home Office with the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, to discuss the Labour government's commitment to an inquiry or investigation, as well as the options and formats of the inquiry. The meeting gave arrested miners and their wives and supporters an opportunity to impress upon the Home Secretary why an Orgrave inquiry needs to start as a matter of urgency to ensure it happens in their lifetime. As a reminder, we talked to John Dunn, a British miner who was arrested and beaten by police back in the 80s during the Margaret Thatcher government. It was incredibly repressive actions by the British government on the striking miners. And so these brothers and sisters have been pushing for a long time with this Truth and Justice campaign. They've been pushing for an official inquiry. They want to have the facts told, the real story told. There was a lot of media propaganda at the time, biased against the miners. So they're looking for the truth, and they're looking for it to happen before all these brothers and sisters pass away. They're looking to see some resolution here and to see some people's names get cleared. So really positive to hear that they have met with the Home Secretary of the Labour government. They noted in their press release, previous conservative Home Secretaries have refused to hold any kind of inquiry, but the Labour Party has promised to hold some kind of inquiry as a manifesto commitment for the last 8 years. Kevin Horn, who was a miner arrested back in the day, said, quote, "It's now over 40 years since striking miners fighting to save our jobs and communities were attacked and arrested by police for picketing the Orgrave coking plant during the 84-85 miners' strike. As the years roll by and many miners have died, those of us left and our families need answers about what the government planned and what the police did. 95 striking miners were arrested at Orgrave on 18 June 1984 after police in full riot gear with truncheons, dogs, and charging horses brutally attacked the miners gathering at a National Union of Mine Workers picket at the coking plant. The miners were later charged with either riot or unlawful assembly with threats of a life prison sentence. Almost a year later, when the cases went to trial in May 1985, it became clear that the police had lied in their evidence and that they had perjured themselves in court." So it's a sad story to recall, but it's also really important that the facts behind what happened and what the government did and didn't do at the time, it's really important that truth gets out there. So really wanted to share that update. Shout out to the Truth and Justice campaign who's continuing to press for this. Keep us updated. We'd love to know how this goes. Shout out to our British Union siblings. And with that out of the way, I want to transition to an interview that Jacob did with Jimmy Williams, who is president of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, one of the building trades unions, and also a union that is active here locally in Alabama. So with that out of the way, I want to let Jacob take it over.
All right, folks, welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morris, and I am joined by President of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, IUPAT, Jimmy Williams. Brother Jimmy Williams, welcome to the program. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jacob.
IUPAT, also a sponsor of the program. We appreciate y'all's support. And so before we we got a couple of topics that we wanted to get to, but I figured it might be worth talking and letting you talk to the audience some about your background. Like, how did you get involved in the labor movement, and what made you want to, ultimately, like with a lot of people that I talk to, your whole life is basically revolving around unions and your union specifically. And that takes a lot of, determination and dedication. And like, there's usually a pretty good story there. So what's the thing that drove you to, want to be president of the Painters Union?
Well, I can honestly say I don't think I ever wanted to be president of our union. It was more of like just growing up in a extremely union household within our union. I'm a fourth generation member of my union. My father, my grandfather, my great grandfather, numerous uncles, cousins. We all, growing up in Northeast Philadelphia, we all kind of gravitated towards one trade particularly, and growing up, I mean, everything that we did was from christenings to, family gatherings, everything was at the union hall. And, it was one of those things that at the kitchen table, it was always, thank the union every time we had dinner or, an event or any sort of family function. And for me particularly, my uncle passed away when I was at a young age, and he was a building trades leader in the city of Philadelphia. And I was young. I was like 14 or 15 years old. And to see the amount of people that came to pay respect, I said, man, if I could ever do like anything with my life that affected people the way this man's life did, to me, that meant everything. Give back to the union, give back to people. And so it was just something I think that was ingrained in me at a young age, very generational.
And so you said that there was and presumably it was the painters union that members of your family kind of were attracted to in particular, and at least over the last few years, IUPAT has gotten something of a reputation of being like the most progressive building trades union. I don't know how much y'all like to lean into that kind of branding or not, but has it always been that way? Has the Painters Union always been kind of at the forefront of the building trades union coalition on, really important progressive issues, or is that something that's happened, relatively recently?
I think it's been an evolution within our union over the last 25, 30 years. And we've had some amazing leaders at the top of our organization that set the course for us. And so I think it's something that we've evolved into and that we absolutely own as like our brand of, we believe strongly in making sure that, we organize in a progressive way, that we service our members in a more progressive way. And, we've had leaders that, quite frankly, I've had the opportunity to watch up close, that I think had set the course for us that we're on today. And we don't plan on ever veering off of that. It's kind of in our DNA. It's what we are.
And so, it is National Apprenticeship Week this week, and apprenticeships are really at the center of speaking about branding, of a lot of the branding of the building trades. Apprenticeships are a really important tool that the building trades have. And so I figured we only have one show a week. So I figured it'd be worth spending a little bit of time on this week, and apprenticeships generally. So why are apprenticeships so important to the building trades? Why do y'all talk about them so much?
Well, because they're the thing that separates the union construction industry from the open shop non-union construction industry, because we invest millions of dollars in our workforce training programs for our future. And because within the construction trade, you don't just get out of high school and know how to work on a 40, 50-story high-rise construction building, read blueprints, do layout work. Like, this isn't something that just anybody can walk out off of one job and go to work in the construction sector. So we have always prided ourselves on, investing deeply and across the building trades. We invest over $1.5 billion a year in direct workforce training. And it's like one of the most untalked about things up until recently that the trades provide to the workforce. And I think we are the third or fourth largest post-secondary education program in the entire country, right? And so it's one of those things that we just hold dearly, and it's kind of fitting that National Apprenticeship Week to be able to talk about it today, knowing that in the future these programs could be put at risk again by an incoming administration that, quite frankly, during their time in office, tried to water it down. And that's a fear going forward, especially at a time where there's such a need for this type of direct education and pipeline training for people to get into these high-paying, quality union jobs. It's something that honestly is like the gold standard that we hold within the unionized construction industry.
And so just to elaborate on that, I want to talk about the attacks that we are anticipating on apprenticeship programs. I was talking to my dad, actually, funny enough. He's a conservative, and I think I haven't asked him how he voted. I'm assuming that he voted for Trump, if he voted. It's kind of frustrating, but he knows the work that I do, and he was actually asking me. He was like, "So are you going to be out of a job? Now that Trump is Trump has been elected." And we were talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the CHIPS and Science Act, and how there have been some strings attached to these dollars that are going out into communities that I think are just common sense, and they shouldn't be a partisan issue, right? That it just seems like, if I, as a taxpayer, when my tax dollars pay for something, I don't want it to go just to the lowest bidder. So that they can, so that these contractors can pay people terrible wages and the executives can make millions of dollars. I want my tax dollars, the public money, to be used for the public good. I want there to be apprenticeship programs. I want there to be good wages. I want the people that do public works to have health care, to have a pension, I have all of this kind of stuff. And he's agreeing with me on all of this stuff. And I really think at the voter level, at the rank and file level, union or non-union, I do genuinely think that the idea of just going to the lowest bidder is not a popular thing. And I want to get to that. But before we do, talking about the apprenticeships specifically and the value that they provide, you mentioned that they are the building trades apprenticeship programs are the third or fourth largest post-secondary education program in the country. And a lot of people, I don't think, realize that union apprenticeship programs are real educational things. You have, because people think of the building trades like, oh, you go to building trades if you're dumb and you can't go to college. And that's just not the case, right? You have to have a certain amount of competency and you have to go through these classes. And so walk us through when building trades apprentices go through these 4 years, what that looks like and what they come out of it with.
Well, it's like the perfect model to how to do workforce development training, because not only are you registered in classes, but you're also already on the job and you're making money as you're learning. And, you know, people think, oh, whatever, you join an apprenticeship program, maybe you'll learn on the job. It's not the case. I mean, our programs are registered with the federal DOL, where we have a set of standards that we have to teach to. You know, there's all sorts of things in there with health and safety, of how to work safely on the job, but also the skills training necessary to be productive. I mean, there's a reason why there are 7,000 employers just in my union. They see the value in it, you know, because we get to help develop a workforce for them. And the training's intense. I mean, you know, it's not something that, you know, just anybody can walk into and succeed, right? Like, it's a deep investment in teaching people a lifelong skill that they can use for the rest of their career in the industry. And it's a proven model that has worked, you know, for generations, really.
And so they're going through these classes, like, I mean, you know, they're working on the job and they're learning on the job, but they're also, you know, going to classes a few times a week, you know, after work, and they're learning these things, and they really do get, you know, the equivalent of a college education, and while they're earning and learning and all this kind of stuff. So it's a really, go ahead.
We have half of our programs around the country are actually registered with the Department of Education and accredited as a associate degree giving body for folks that can work towards a college education and college degree at the end of it. In certain parts of the country, our apprentices walk away with their apprenticeship completion, but also leave with an associate's degree that they can use to advance their career too. And it's completely 100% free to those workers, because it's paid into by all the other members or that work under our collective bargaining agreements. It's just a proven model, you know.
And you mentioned, you know, some of the forces that are antagonistic to apprenticeship programs, and specifically one of those is the associated builders and contractors. And one of my biggest frustrations, and I talked to a reporter about this in Alabama, and I kind of chastised him a little bit because he referenced the ABC just as if, and most people think it is, just like a neutral, you know, construction contractor coalition that just wants to build things, and they care about, you know, they're just a construction industry trade group, and so these are the experts about the construction industry, and we should talk to them. And it was frustrating, in particular, because the article that they were quoted in was an article about, like, construction worker mental health and the high suicide rate among construction workers, because I know, and you know, that the conditions that the ABC puts on these people and that puts on their workers is a huge contributor to the problem of mental health among construction workers. And then to see them kind of quoted as like, oh, look at what the ABC is doing to help, you know, construction workers, was just so frustrating. But can you explain what the ABC is in actuality, and then how they approach their workforce development and workforce training programs, and how the ABC's style of apprenticeships, to the extent that they even call it that, is like is inferior to what the union apprenticeship programs give?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the long history of the ABC is, you know, they were established 100% solely by the Chamber of Commerce and by business owners to break union collective bargaining agreements and union strongholds. And, you know, they are 100% a management organization made up of employers, all 100% anti-union, non-union employers that did not want to adhere to standards that were established over the course of generations in the construction industry. And that's, you know, what they were set up to do. And so within that, they speak in this tone that they somehow represent workers. They do not. They're 100% set up to support business and to support the business community. And it has to be understood, because whenever there is, you know, trillions of dollars at play in the construction industry. Any sort of business organization is going to look to maximize their profits and not adhere to standards that are going to help the working class, right? And that is what the ABC is. It's what the ABC always was. Within that, they've developed workforce models that do not adhere to Department of Labor standards, that do not have the registered nature of the apprenticeship program. So people may join an apprenticeship program with the ABC. Well, it means absolutely nothing on the back end, and it has no standards to it. And number three, typically they don't even graduate their apprentices. It's just set up as a model that appears to be the unionized model. And it just isn't. It just 100% isn't, never was. It's a 100% controlled business organization, solely established to push back on the standards that have been established. They're 100% against Davis-Bacon and prevailing wages. They stand against project labor agreements. They're against Department of Labor registered apprenticeship programs. So literally everything that the unionized construction industry stands for, the ABC stands in direct opposition to.
And a lot of the problem with their, kind of quote unquote training or apprenticeship programs is that they the union apprenticeship programs, you really come out, if you graduate from the painters union's apprenticeship program or the iron workers apprenticeship program, you come out as a well-rounded tradesman with a general understanding of your craft. And what my understanding has been from conversations with like building trades folks is like the ABC programs, they teach to the task and they do not create, right, like a well-rounded tradesman that can go off and do any iron worker job. They take a look at like, okay, we're doing this bridge construction and I need one person who's going to turn this wrench for, 7 months. So I'm going to have this, I'm going to teach him how to turn the wrench properly, right? And then he's going to turn the wrench for 7 months. And then, and then I get to pay him less because he's not really a craftsman, a tradesman. He just knows how to turn a wrench. I can pay him less. He's not going to be able to compete for higher wages on the next job that I bring him in to turn a different wrench, right? And so it's frustrating that the kind of equivalence that people draw. And so
they also have no infrastructure to do the training. I mean, we have over 300 certified master trainers around the United States. We have training facilities that are 700 or 100,000 square foot training facilities all throughout the country where the hands-on training's being performed. They don't have that infrastructure and have no vehicle to invest in the type of training we do.
Right. And so you mentioned that under the last Trump administration, the union apprenticeship programs came under attack. And so could you remind us what those attacks were and explain to folks, like my dad, who last night was kind of, I don't know if he was necessarily surprised at me, at my anticipation that a lot of these strings from some of the Bill and IRA funding are going to be pulled back or not enforced as vigorously as they might have been under the Biden administration. But to a maybe a more conservative person like my dad who believes that, yes, like if my tax dollars are funding something, I don't want it to go to make some guy rich and then underpay and undertrain the people at the bottom. Right. He doesn't agree with that. And so what are the attacks that happened in the last administration? What do you anticipate going forward? And why is this happening? Why does this have to be a partisan thing? Why don't Republicans agree that we should have well-trained tradesmen?
Well, I mean, the attack came towards the end of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. And what the attack was to take away the Department of Labor and the oversight of registered apprenticeship programs and hand them over solely to the business community. So the business community could say, and anybody can say, I have an apprenticeship program on paper, and then they self-regulate their apprenticeship programs, and they water down the standards, and they could do whatever they want. And having business and industry controlled workforce development training is a horrible model, and it's one that would not, be able to stand the test of time to do the things that we've done over generations, right? And it's all because there is a ton of money to be made off of these public investments in construction. And anytime you turn over the public good to the private sector, you are going to have nothing but greed take over. You're going to have nothing but a lack of oversight, and all of these standards that have been fought for go away. Now, the Trump administration took a little bit of time before they made this direct assault and direct attack on the registered apprenticeship programs. And quite frankly, they ran out of time. And by the time they instituted, their version of industry controlled apprenticeship programs, he lost his reelection bid. And the first thing President Biden did was overturn the executive orders and restore the Department of Labor's oversight over registered apprenticeship programs. There is no way that this current Trump administration is going to take that long of a time. The direct assault will come pretty early, and it'll come fast, especially given the time we live in right now, where there is over $3 trillion worth of government direct investment in construction work through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the CHIPS bill, and the Inflation Reduction Act. There's too much money to be made for business, and there's going to be a direct attack there so that they can profitize and maximize their profits off of the public investment.
And so, you said that the Department of Labor is probably not going to take as much time to try to ramp up this attack. Over the last couple of days, it's been in the news that Teamsters President Sean O'Brien is pushing for Chavez de Reamer, Representative Lori Chavez de Reamer, a Republican from Oregon, who has apparently been, I'm not familiar with this person, but apparently she has been a more pro-labor Republican, like one of the three that exist maybe across the country, ostensibly. Again, I'm not familiar with her record, but Teamsters President Sean O'Brien has been pushing for her. Do you have any insight into this person? If this person was nominated to the Department of Labor, do you think that potentially these concerns that you have about the apprenticeships specifically would be alleviated, or is her pro-labor record kind of overblown, or is there no chance that she's nominated?
Well, no, I mean, listen, I have no insight as to what the Trump administration is thinking currently. I can tell you that if she were to be appointed, it would be a direct nod to organized labor enough to know that we have somebody there that at least understands our issues. And that's a good thing, so that we can at least have an open door to discuss things that she is keenly aware of. And she is one of only 3 Republicans that voted for the PRO Act in Congress. She understands organized labor's issues. To me, this is going to be the test of the incoming administration. Are they going to pick someone like her, or are they going to pick somebody that comes directly from the business community that is solely intent on tearing down these longstanding standards and not fight on behalf of labor? And that's going to be the test. And so yes, and thank God that we at least have somebody that we can put forth that says, all right, they understand our issues, because the rest of the incoming crew does not,
right,
and is fundamentally opposed to the things that we have fought for a long time. So this will be the test of this current administration and what they are really thinking around workers' rights and the working class as it relates to organized labor.
Yeah, you mentioned the incoming crew. I mean, the most recent addition was Pam Bondi for Attorney General, and she, as Attorney General of Florida, was de facto responsible for the enforcement of Florida's minimum wage law, which is higher than the federal minimum wage law, because Florida, during her tenure as Attorney General there, did not have a Department of Labor. It was abolished under Jeb Bush. And she did not prosecute a single minimum wage violation case, right? And so these are not kind of even just the most recent one, you can point specifically to, like, this is not a person concerned with labor issues. And so, and so as we're wrapping up, I'm interested in your thoughts on the election specifically. This is obviously a huge news. We just talked about how maybe there's a potential for reprieve, specifically from the Department of Labor perspective. We'll see. I don't know that either of us are necessarily holding our breath, just because of the forces that support the Trump administration are not going to be friendly to our type of politics as it relates to labor. But looking back on the election, what is the role generally that you think unions played prior to November 5th?
Well, I mean, we could talk about this for hours because there's so much to unpack, right? But when you look at an incoming administration that's made up of the folks that Donald Trump has surrounded himself with, even if there is somebody at the Department of Labor that has an ear that we could speak to, all you're doing is buying time. Right. The forces within the administration and the Republican Party are solely bent on trying to destroy, the current makeup of organized labor, right? And that's the reality. I mean, we talked about 3 people in the Republican caucus that voted for protecting the right to organize, right? If the rest of the Republican Party is 100% against it. And same thing with the folks, that surround Donald Trump. So let's not kid ourselves. But the problem that we have is that the Democratic Party has lost the message to the working class as well. And, we find ourselves in this position where most working people are torn against each other. And what you see is you have working people that are the ones that can decide the fate of any election just being completely pitted against one another. And it's because both parties have failed to be able to really, truly capitalize on that pain that working people have. Donald Trump's been able to tap into it and tap into people's fear and anxiety, but hasn't provided any sort of path forward. The Democratic Party has lacked the ability to connect to the message of how they are going to help working people too. And organized labor, we find ourselves right in the middle of that. And we find ourselves in the crosshairs oftentimes from both parties. And when we went out and spoke to our members, we spoke about the good things that the Biden administration did. We were able to move them. We were one of the only pillars of the Democratic Party that outperformed the rest of the electorate. We had over 58% support. And people look at that like, oh, well, that's only within, maybe 5 to 10%. That is big, when you're talking about being able to move working class people. And the Democratic Party has failed to capitalize on any real message. So, we find ourselves in this position now where it's literally a fight for where does organized labor stand within both parties. And until the Democratic Party understands that their working class message has to be, how do we help working people that are not in unions gain power in the workplace? That message never seems to come out of the Democratic Party. What you hear from the Democratic Party is we will support union workers. Oh, and when unions do well, all workers do well. Well, that doesn't resonate to somebody who's working a minimum wage job or is working as a misclassified 1099 construction employee who has no access to collective bargaining, no access to, a secure healthcare system and a secure retirement. It just doesn't speak to them.
Right. And so, there are going to be a lot of conversations over the next 4 years among the Democratic coalition about how do we respond. And there are already some that are saying that, and it's funny because, like you said, union members are like I think the only demographic that did not trend Republican, and that according to at least some surveys voted in higher numbers for Harris than Biden. The only demographic, and yet still there are Democrats who are saying that, okay, well, the way to win is to jettison the support for unions from our platform. What is your response to folks like that say that, well, we tried the populism, we tried the economic stuff, with the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, we tried it, it didn't work. Now we just have to be Republican light.
Yeah, well, that is a doomed and failed approach for all working class voters. And if that approach takes hold, we have a serious issue on our hand for working class people, not for labor unions, but for working class people as a whole. The message that needs to come out of the Democratic Party is, how are you going to give more power to the working class, right? Not just send some crumbs down every opportunity you get through legislation. I mean, we really need a party that understands how to organize a message, and how to mobilize workers, period. If the Democratic Party doesn't understand that that's their path forward to the working class, then they're going to lose them, and they're going to lose them for good. And the time's now for them to really understand that it takes an organizing message. And how are you going to go back into places like Alabama, West Virginia, large swaths of the country that have been just completely written off by the Democratic Party, and where workers have also turned away from the Democratic Party? You need to go back in with an organizing message about how you're going to give power back to the working class, period. How you're going to fight for things that are going to make their lives better. And just providing a tax cut or a tax incentive to somebody, that doesn't resonate. You got to speak from a position of power, and how you're going to build a working class movement that gives workers power in this country. Guess who does that? The labor movement. The labor movement provides that power for working people, not a party, not the government. The labor movement does. So if anybody steps away from the labor movement during this time period, that is a failed and doomed approach.
What should the labor movement be doing over the next 4 years, both to, defend ourselves from the attacks that the Trump administration will undoubtedly hurl at us, but also is there opportunity to go on the offense over the next 4 years and potentially do what we haven't done really for the last 30 years and build union density? What should the labor movement be doing over the next 4 years?
We have to do what we do. We have to double down our efforts to organize unorganized workers. And when we do that, we have this opportunity over the next 4 years to show the American public how difficult it is, because of a broken system, for worker power in this country. And if we walk away from organizing unorganized workers during this time period, we will regret it. If anything, we have to double down and triple down our efforts to organize the unorganized. And during this time period where we know that the NLRB is not going to be supportive of workers, where we know that the federal government's not going to support the right to organize, we have to organize a movement across all sectors of our economy to show how flawed the system is, so that we can build a working class movement again that demands change. That is what's missing in the working class right now, is an organized message, a militant organized message, to bring it to light so that we can then push for real reform to give the working class a voice again in this country. And you're not going to hear that from the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party gets an opportunity right now to reshape its image. If they want to do it, I would hope that they do it through a working class lens.
We've gone a little bit long. I appreciate your patience. My last question here is, I saw you on Twitter yesterday. You met with Bernie Sanders. There was a really interesting effort that
that I'd love to pick your brain about in the 90s to form a labor party. And there's been some conversation, and it's perennially brought up in union meetings and all this kinds of stuff, and that we need a labor party. And I'm kind of, I'm sympathetic to the idea, but I'm not so sure about it. But I saw, you with Bernie Sanders. I think one of the words that was used about it was scheming. You were scheming with Bernie Sanders, and he put out something Bernie did after the election, said, "Stay tuned." So is there any news that you have that you want to break here about your schemes with Bernie Sanders?
Well, first off, I think he had it right. And he had it right in 2016. He had it right in 2020. But because the Democratic Party had learned and over time to play it safe and continue to, try to, receive its funding and support from both the business community and Wall Street, I think you can never serve two masters, right? And I think the labor movement, and I agree. I mean, listen, we have to work within the two-party structure at this point, right? But the labor movement can certainly stand as an independent voice for working class people and take every election and make every election about supporting working class people. And before we give our support to Democratic candidates just because they have a D in front of their name, I think we have to really think about how we're organizing working people's power. And more people are classifying themselves as independents. And more people, I think, are looking for independent voices. And I think if we take this opportunity to really be smart about how the labor movement calls balls and strikes on both parties and is the independent voice that supports working class people in this country, we can start winning again.
President Williams, International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit nalc.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Adam Keller, and my co-host and fellow agitator Jacob Morrison is out this weekend, so just hold it down today. Today has been an interesting show already. We've had a lot of folks on YouTube, a lot of folks chiming in on the chat. Appreciate that. If you have anything to add, you can give us a call. Our number is 844-899-TVLR. Give us a call. We will take calls during OT, during overtime. Still got about 20 minutes or so before we get into overtime. We've got a lot planned, and I'm really excited to have Eric Blanc coming on the show around 11:15 this morning. That should be a great interview. If you're not reading his stuff, I really recommend it. I've been reading Eric's work for many years now. I remember his book, Red State Revolt. That was a good one. I really enjoyed that. So looking forward to that. Also, we have some big news from the UAW. We have Boss Watch, of course. I've got some other stories lined up, so a lot to talk about. Really enjoyed that interview with Jimmy Williams just now. There was a lot that, stood out to me, a lot that I could talk about a little bit more here in a sec. For those of you who don't know, we do air live on WVNN, which is the conservative talk radio station in Huntsville, Athens. We're live on the radio every Saturday from 9:30 to 11. With our overtime half of the show after 11 airing online on YouTube and Facebook. It also airs now on WMMT in Whitesburg, Kentucky. We got our start on WVNN, birthplace of Sean Hannity and home to all sorts of propaganda, frankly, that we find objectionable. But we do think it's important to get a different perspective out there to multiple audiences. We're happy that a portion of the show is replayed during the week on WZZA, the historic black radio station in Northwest Alabama, and on WHIV, which is a community radio station in New Orleans, and as I mentioned, on WMMT, a really cool community station up in Whitesburg, Kentucky. If you are connected to any radio stations, if you've got a connection to a community station, college radio, anywhere, just let us know. We would love to spread our radio footprint, and I'll be talking more about that here in a second. So we do release the full episode each week on Spotify, Apple, all the various podcasting apps. So do subscribe to us on your app of choice, and please give us a good review. It's really easy to do that, and that really does help. We appreciate it. Throughout the week, clips of the show are released as standalone videos on YouTube, so you can check out a specific segment or interview that you want to find. If you want to go back and check out back catalog stuff. Folks who've been listening for a while know that we try to mix it up with news and current events, but we also do labor history. We talk about educational stuff in terms of Unions 101 and Organizing 101 and negotiations. What is a collective bargaining agreement? What are some of the rules that you have to follow as a union? We've done content on all that kind of stuff, and you can check that out on our YouTube channel at the Valley Labor Report. And all of that content is free. We do all this for free. We don't charge, we don't paywall any of our content. So really want to appreciate everyone who has donated, especially during this fundraising drive this past week or so. And thanks to all of you who comment and call in. I know that not everyone agrees with everything we say, and that is the nature of being in the media and talking about the kind of things that we talk about. But I do hope that you can find value in working class folks trying to talk to other working class folks about issues that are relevant to working class folks, especially here in the South. So yeah, thank you everyone who has been donating. If you believe it's important to have our own media of, by, and for the Southern working class, please do consider supporting us however you can. We've got some really great stuff lined up. As part of this fundraising drive, we are really hoping to raise funds, not just to sustain the program, but to expand our radio footprint. As I mentioned, we're on the air in a few different spots, 4 stations across 3 states now. We would love to get on the air in some organizing hotspots. We've done a lot of coverage of the UAW over the past couple of years, the UAW campaigns in Tuscaloosa at Mercedes there, which went to a vote earlier this year, as well as the campaign at Hyundai over in the Montgomery area, and of course the huge victory in Chattanooga, just up the road in Tennessee. And we would love to be on the radio in those areas. Same with Anniston, another organizing hotspot where you had the big victory of New Flyer earlier, and you also had Wells Fargo organizing in Anniston. So a lot of activity there. We would love to be on the radio where there's organizing happening, here in Alabama and across the South, because we see this as movement media. We are doing what we can to try to boost organizing and try to have a real life impact. I'll be honest, I am not really a big fan of being in front of the camera or being in front of the microphone. I'm not very comfortable with media. Never have been. I've never really felt at ease doing it. I'm not one of those people who thrives off of it. But as a young activist, pretty quickly I realized how powerful media could really be. I got my start as a high school history teacher, and I saw how media shaped my students. But of course, not just them, but their parents and my colleagues and everyone that I was dealing with. And as I got more involved in fighting back against corporate education reform and school privatization, I saw firsthand how regular working class people's stories were not being told in the media. Our perspective wasn't getting out there. There was, basically a one-sided narrative on many issues that we deal with in our regular lives. We're hearing from the bosses and the politicians, but we're not really hearing from regular working class people, everyday people. As I got more involved, I did use media to the extent that I could, whether it was writing op-eds or doing local TV interviews and things like that. And it was remarkable how it could help. And, a few years ago, back in 2020, during the height of the pandemic, I was going through some tough times myself. My spirits were pretty low, and I turned on the radio and I heard the Valley Labor Report. I had met David Story and Jacob Morrison already doing movement stuff over the years. I know we attended a labor notes workshop together. So I was familiar with the project. I knew kind of what they were doing, but I turned on the radio and was listening to the Valley Labor Report back in 2020 and heard a brother from the Chicago Teachers Union, someone who was an activist with CORE, the Caucus of Rank and File Educators. And this was a militant Democratic Reform Caucus that had organized for years, eventually won power in the Chicago Teachers Union. And in 2012, which was the same year I started teaching, they led the historic strike for the schools Chicago students deserved, fighting back against corporate goon mayor Rahm Emanuel, who I hear is like in the running to be chair of the Democratic Party, which is fascinating. It was so cool to hear someone talking about the Caucus of Rank and File Educators and how, rank and file educators, teachers, counselors, librarians, custodians, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, how folks could come together and organize in their communities, build coalitions with parents and neighbors and allies, and really unite around their common interests and build power in the workplace and beyond. And I was hearing this on an Alabama talk radio station that normally airs garbage. And so I knew I wanted to get involved in this project. I knew there was something really cool and powerful about that. It spoke to me and the journey I had been on, getting started in education, and as a unionist. And it was, spring of 2021 when I really joined the project. And at that point, I joined just in time for Strike Fest, which was, a multi-day event. We went down to Brookwood, Alabama. The UMWA coal miners, over 1,000 of them, were on strike at the time against Warrior Met Coal. Just a really despicable company. And we had a live in-person fundraiser, concert. We had comedians, musicians, there was food, a big party at the Union Hall. We also did a live stream marathon for God knows how many hours. It was well over 24 hours. I don't even remember it all. All in all, we worked with so many amazing people, locally there, in and around Brookwood and with the UMWA, but also from the community, writ large across Alabama, and across the South, and people all over the world. We ended up raising over $75,000 for the striking miners, and I got to meet so many amazing people. And so, that was kind of my introduction to the Valley Labor Report, and it really taught me the power that we could have with a platform like this, that we could make a real life impact. And we have been trying to do that ever since. We've been growing this project over the past few years since then. We have a bigger audience. We have more YouTube subscribers, all that good stuff. But we're trying to make the content itself better. And we're trying to make sure that we are really making a difference. My organizing travels have brought me all over the place over the past couple years. And it's been remarkable to run into people in real life who actually heard of this program. And even more remarkable when people tell me, like, it made a difference. I was at a march and rally in Montgomery this spring and ran into the United Campus workers who are doing great work here in the public sector down in the South, particularly here in Alabama. And ran into the union folks there at the march, and they told me, they recognized me from the show, and they told me that they had someone on campus find them after hearing an interview we did on the Valley Labor Report, and they got involved in their union, right? And now they have a new potential activist in their union because they heard about it on this, silly show. And that's pretty remarkable. We've heard from folks who converted their business to a workers' cooperative. They got connected with someone that they heard on our program and worked with them to do this transition. We've heard from folks who got more involved in their union, stepped up to be a steward or run for union office, folks who started organizing in their workplace after listening to the program, or, contacted their lawmakers, any number of things. And, that's why we do what we do. We have tried to use this platform to boost organizing. Like I said, we're really proud to work with the workers at New Flyer over in Anniston. The very first card in that campaign, the very first union card for the New Flyer workers, was signed live on the air on the Valley Labor Report. Was out there on the ground in Anniston, and we got to have the very first card signed. And what was ultimately a very successful campaign, the biggest union win in Alabama in some time. Over 500 workers at this clean bus manufacturing facility. And that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to do, right? It's spotlight organizing that's happening in the South when working people are coming together across our diversity, but along our common interests, and winning and fighting back. That's what we're trying to highlight. And we've been proud to spotlight local stories such as the Teamsters organizing school bus drivers in Huntsville, the Scottsboro workers with Starbucks, you name it. If it's been happening in our territory, we've been trying to shine a light on it. And we really rely on y'all, our audience, to get a lot of this, these tips. And so I really appreciate everyone in this community. I have seen the collective power of this audience and this community around this project, and y'all's collective networks, the people that the people you're connected to. So without further ado, I do want to thank all of the folks who have donated more than $75 to our fund drive. And again, you can go to tvlr.fm/union2024 if you want to check the progress, if you want to see where we're at right now. But let me thank the following people: Anthony Beard, Mary Topi, Jared Leggett, Sydney Roberts, Jay Malone, Thomas Berryhill, David Can, Rick Job, Jacob Jones, Sol Osterkatz, Steve Early, Dave Smith, John Newsham, Kyle Kern, Tristan Gilbert, Kayla Sloan, Dustin Harrington, Adam Larson, the Birmingham DSA. We had multiple contributions on behalf of Birmingham DSA. Thank you. Colin Randall, Zachary Kahn, Brian Kelly, Joseph Topi, Lance Ingerson, Thurman Wenzel, Chris Langford, Julian Germain, Isaac Stanridge, Nicholas Venn. We had a contribution on behalf of the Labor Notes Alabama Troublemaker School, Reese Murtaugh, and again, another Birmingham DSA contribution. So again, you can go to tvlr.fm/union2024. Here are some of the gifts that you can get if you donate. If you donate $25, you'll get 2 TVLR matchbooks. If you donate $75, you'll get 2 TVLR matchbooks, plus your name mentioned on the stream, like those folks just now. If you donate $150, you'll get 2 TVLR matchbooks, your name mentioned on the stream, and a free unionized t-shirt and sticker. If you're willing to do $250, you'll get 2 TVLR matchbooks, your name mentioned on the stream, a free unionized t-shirt and sticker, and a free TVLR logo cap. And if we do hit our stretch goal of $15,000, we will have a live show in the city with the largest number of individuals donating. So right now, Huntsville is winning, but I know there are other cities out there where we have support. We really love and appreciate our local audience, but we know we've got folks who listen all over the place, and we would appreciate your support. So thank you to everyone who has contributed, everyone who's liked and shared. Love to get back talking union and about the news and relevant issues to working class people, but we do have to raise money to keep this project going. And, just really can't do it without you. So really want to thank everyone else. Keep it going. Today's the last day of the fundraiser. Let's see where we are at before we wrap things up here on the main show. Looks like our total right now is $7,738.73. All right, so we are over 77% towards our goal of $10,000. Again, it ends today. So if you can, please do contribute tvlr.fm/union2024. With that, we are going to get on out of here on the radio. We will be sticking around for another hour and a half online on YouTube and Facebook. And that will be our overtime program. You don't want to miss that. So please do stick around. Find us at tvlr.fm. If you are on the radio, we will see you next week.
You poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
All right. So we are off the radio, I believe, and we're going to take a really quick break, and we will be back with overtime. We are talking UAW, we're talking to Eric Blanc, and we've got a lot lined up, so you don't want to miss this. We'll be back in just a sec.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Hey folks, you are still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show. I appreciate you being here. For those of you who've been listening already, you know that my co-host and fellow agitator Jacob Morrison is out today, so I'm taking the lead. Most of you know I typically don't do that, so I do appreciate y'all sticking around today. I hope you've enjoyed the program so far. I do appreciate Jacob getting that interview taped with IUPAT President Jimmy Williams. I really enjoyed that interview, and I appreciate President Williams taking the time to do that. There was a lot to digest. It is National Apprenticeship Week, so I loved the conversation there. I'm a big fan of the apprenticeship programs of the building trades. Anytime I get a chance to talk about those with young people, I do so because not everyone is going to go to college. Not everyone wants to go to college. Not everyone should have to go to college. And for a lot of folks out there, if college is not what you want to do, after high school, going into a building trades apprenticeship program is really a great opportunity. You get paid while you're learning, right? So you're making an income. That's already better than going to college in a way, right? Because you're paying to be at college, right? And you're not working while you're in class. So as an apprentice, you're getting paid while you're learning. And once you graduate, you are going to have a solid career path pretty much anywhere in North America. You can go wherever the work takes you or wherever, your heart desires. And you'll have a great pension and health care. You'll have actual benefits, right, as a blue-collar worker in the building trades. So, I get it. Not everyone wants to work with their hands. Those of you who can see me on YouTube know I'm a pretty scrawny fellow myself. So, ironworking is not for me, but I really love those brothers and sisters who do it. I appreciate what they do. So big fan of the apprenticeship programs. It is National Apprenticeship Week. I do hope that we will not see those programs under attack from the upcoming administration, but it's definitely something to keep our eye on. There were some other interesting things that, President Williams mentioned in that interview, and it will be up on YouTube this week for those of you who missed it, or you can always go back earlier on the live stream, of course. There was some political conversation, and I got to tell you, there's been a lot of conversations that I've been having with folks here in Alabama about politics and about, just sort of the dismal state of things. As I mentioned before the election, 15 of 17 candidates on my ballot were unopposed Republicans. And it wasn't much better next door in Madison County, which is the home to Huntsville, the largest city in the state, and where we broadcast from. There were 4 Democrats out of, I think, 32 offices, and there were 8 Libertarians in comparison, so double as many. And so that's something that we're dealing with here in the state, is that most of the elections are not even contested, much less competitive. And so that is an issue. And it's something that a lot of people are talking about, and what can we do about it? I think there's, some of the conversation that Jacob and President Williams had about working folks, that really resonated with me. My interest is in seeing working class people have better lives. And I think we have to build our power as working class people and build a mass movement of working class people to achieve that, to really win a future that we can believe in, to win the kind of policies that we need to have better lives. That means uniting a diverse working class majority. And unfortunately, there is a lot of divide and conquer out there. It's something that's been perfected over many, many generations here in the United States, in particular. So we deal with racial divisions and divisions along religious lines and gender, immigration, other issues, and divisions that are both real and artificial, things that are influenced by media. And I believe that there's a lot of propaganda out there, unfortunately. If you look at the media landscape, vast majority of media is controlled by a handful of corporations. So you have the consolidation of corporate media, and then you have, the nonsense that airs on talk radio and all over YouTube and podcast. I'm not a media professional, and I don't pretend to be a genius of any kind. I'm just a regular working class activist. But I don't lie to folks, and I don't try to confuse people or divide people or get people riled up at the wrong thing. And unfortunately, there are a lot of folks using their platforms to do that. So we do have our work cut out for us when it comes to building working class solidarity, working class power. I think President Williams was correct to point to the labor movement as the great hope there. And the reality is that unions are much more popular than Democrats and Republicans. They're much more popular than Trump and Biden and Harris and Congress. Popularity opinion polls are just one thing, but that's not nothing. And I think we do have that opportunity as the folks who are the most organized, as the folks who have taken that step to build collective organizations by and for working people. We do have that opportunity to show leadership and to push our issues forward. And I know certainly that's what we're devoted to doing here in North Alabama. For those of you who are more local, if you're interested in getting involved locally, please do reach out to the North Alabama Area Labor Council. But if you are not local, reach out to your area labor council. Get more involved in your union. And if you're not in a union, you're listening to this, well, you should be, right? And think through how you could organize in your workplace and what that looks like, because we need more union members. And we'll have Eric Blanc on here in a couple minutes. We'll be talking a little bit more about that in reaction to his latest article that basically makes the case that there's no reason for us as labor to retreat, that we shouldn't just resign ourselves to, continued decline over the next 4 years. Are we going to have a lot of defensive actions? That seems likely, given what we can anticipate based on the last Trump administration, based on the wealthy, powerful interests that are, coalescing behind this administration. But that said, we can still organize new workers, right? And we can still push our issues forward and put forward a positive vision of what a better community, a better state, a better country could really look like when working people come together. So that's what motivates me. I do believe that we've got to see real interracial people power, a mass movement in a way that we haven't seen in a long time, in many generations. Throughout the 1930s through the 60s, we did see these waves of people power and mass movements, and it was a push and pull, right? It wasn't just a steady line of progress, but there were real gains made for everyday people. If you look at the labor upsurge of the 1930s, workers organized in a way that they never had before and haven't since, at least on the scale of things. And it made a difference, right? It made a huge material difference. And there are still folks who are kind of benefiting from the generational impact of that organizing. And we know that Alabama is, in many ways a home to the civil rights movement. Everyday people organized here in Alabama and across the South to win real material gains for people of color and for all working people. So we can do this. We can make things better. I really do believe that. I have faith and hope. And I've seen up close and personal when everyday people can come together and work together on our common interests. We don't all have to agree on everything. We don't have to all think alike or talk alike or look alike. But at the end of the day, most of us want a lot of the same things. Most of us want to come home safely from work. We want to have a good quality of life for ourselves and our families. We want to be able to take care of our families without stressing. We don't want to be crushed by debt, right? We want a decent future for our kids. We want to believe that our kids will have it better than we had it. These are common experiences and common dreams and aspirations that I think working people have. And labor has solutions for that, right? Because when we come together and organize in the workplace and we build power for ourselves, we can win the better wages that we deserve. We can win the better benefits that we deserve. We can win the respect and the voice that we deserve. We can win the safety that we deserve, right? We can win real material improvements for our lives and for our families. And we can build coalitions in the community to uplift working people more broadly. And so, those are the things that I think I work on, I'm devoted to, I'm passionate about, and it's why we do this radio show. It's why we do the Valley Labor Report. We try to get that message out there that when working people come together, we can do pretty amazing things. And we can take on really powerful interests, really powerful companies. And it's going to take labor organizing on a big scale to defend working people and to challenge oligarchy that is so dominating this country. We deal with multiple layers of crisis, right? We have a lot of crisis bearing down upon us, from inequality to the climate. We've got a lot we're dealing with as a people. And solidarity is our best weapon. Solidarity is how we move forward. So with that out of the way, do we have Eric on the Zoom? Okay, well, y'all let me know when Eric pops in, because we'll be continuing that conversation, talking about how do we organize at scale? What does organizing look like over these next 4 years? But before we bring Eric on, I do want to go ahead and get Boss Watch out of the way. We haven't done Boss Watch as consistently as last week in Southern Labor. But for those of you who don't know, it is something we put out as a newsletter as well. Much like last week in Southern Labor, we track what's going on over the past week. But in this case, we look for bad bosses. We look for the criminal activities of companies, and we keep an eye on that. We report out for you because we figure if you turn on the local news, you're going to hear a lot about, petty criminals, often very poor people who are in bad circumstances, and you're going to see their mugshots. But you don't hear nearly as much about bad bosses who are breaking the law. All right, so our first story here for Boss Watch involves some Kentucky child abusers. The United States Department of Labor has found a franchisee of 2 Marco's Pizza restaurants in Knoxville. This is Tennessee. So the U.S. Department of Labor has found a franchisee of 2 Marco's Pizza restaurants in Knoxville employed children to clean and disassemble dangerous equipment and work outside of legally allowed hours in violation of federal child labor laws. Investigators with the department's Wage and Hour Division found that Deliver Magic LLC, Deliver Magic 2 LLC, and owner Stephen Petrone, operating as Marco's Pizza on Maynardsville Pike and Ebenezer Road, employed 20 children to disassemble and clean dough sheeters, which was a violation of a child labor hazardous occupation order under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Fair Labor Standards Act, by the way, one of those things we won in the 1930s. The employer also employed 15-year-olds in cooking and baking activities, which both are prohibited under federal child labor laws for children under the age of 16. In addition, the employer violated the FLSA child labor hours standard by employing 11 workers between the ages of 14 and 15 to work past 7 p.m. between Labor Day and June 1st. To address the violations, the employer and the restaurants have entered into an enhanced compliance agreement with the department and have paid $207,000 in civil money penalties. In addition to paying penalties, Deliver Magic 2, and Patron agreed to do the following: prevent children from working in any hazardous occupation, including disassembling and reassembling dough sheeters and operating and cleaning dough rollers. Ensure 14 and 15-year-olds do not work outside of permitted hours, including during school hours, and do not engage in prohibited cooking activities. Provide materials to all locations regarding federal child labor laws. Update management training programs, training materials, and onboarding materials to include information regarding FLSA compliance. Ensure all managers and supervisors review child labor materials on an annual basis and sign a compliance acknowledgement form certifying their knowledge of the materials. Require all employees under age 16 and their parents or guardians to sign a document indicating that they understand the child labor occupational and hour standards. And finally, ensure employees under age 16 wear modified uniforms or color-coded name tags. In fiscal year 2024, the department investigated 736 cases with child labor violations involving 4,030 children nationwide. The department addressed these violations by assessing employers more than $15.1 million in civil money penalties, which was an 89% increase from the previous year. So there were a few other stories, including a Tunica fish farm, where there was some retaliation and intimidation happening. We also had some dishonorable mentions, including a restaurant down in Florida, as well as a retirement plan that was being sketchy. All of that you can find at Boss Watch as a newsletter. Go to tvlr.fm. You can subscribe there. Get it in your inbox every week. That's Boss Watch, because believe me, folks, that's just what gets caught, right? That's just what we can find through the news press releases. We all know there's a whole lot more criminal activity out there happening. So if you've got any criminal activity happening among bosses that you're aware of, always feel free to hit us up at tvlr.fm/contact. And I've heard that we do have Eric on the Zoom, so I want to bring on our guest. Really excited to have Eric Blanc, an assistant professor of labor studies at Rutgers University. He is the author of We Are the Union, How Worker-to-Worker Organizing is Revitalizing Labor and Winning Big, as well as Red State Revolt, the Teachers' Strike Wave, and Working Class Politics. Eric, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned to listeners as you were coming on the Zoom that, you know, we've been talking a little bit about organizing and what organizing looks like here over the next 4 years. And you put out a new article. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about this new article. You're making the case that unions should go big, right? So tell us a little bit about that and your case for why unions should go on the offense over the next few years.
Sure. I think, unfortunately, a lot of union leaders are assuming that because Trump got elected, that this means that the most labor can do over the next 4 years is defensive battles to survive. And the problem with that is, first of all, I think it's misreading the terrain. And then second, it's a surefire recipe for actually being as ineffective as possible for actually combating Trump and Trumpism. So let me explain why. It's true that political factors are important for organizing. I mean, it is a reality that Biden's NLRB was a good NLRB, and it helped organizing significantly. You know, so that's a real step backwards to not have that. We don't know how long we might still have a pro-union board, but you know, sooner or later it's going to be at best under Republican control and might be dismantled even further. So that's, you know, that does make organizing harder. On the other hand, there's all these other factors that continue to make new organizing, you know, bringing in new members possible and necessary. So one of them is just the general fact that Trump got elected in large part due to economic anger, and his policies are going to exacerbate the inequalities and insecurities that he was preying upon. And so unions are really workers' best and major tool for combating the very things that they're hoping to see. But let me put it this way: for winning the things that they might think Trump can deliver, but that actually only collective action from below can deliver. So the contradictions on the economy are remaining strong. Similarly, there's going to be a tight labor market still. We're in a very tight labor market currently, and that's projected to continue for the foreseeable future. And so that gives workers more leverage to go on strike. You're less likely to be scared about risking a job loss by organizing if you might be able to get a similar job down the road at a similar place. And so the tight labor market is another major factor. Also, unions still have a ton of money. This is something that Chris Bonner, a labor researcher, has found, and so he's the co-author with me of this piece. We're talking about almost $40 billion in assets that unions are sitting on that could be used not only to defend against Trump's attacks, because there's going to be major attacks on labor, but to go on the offensive, to fight for new unions, to spread the campaigns that we're seeing at Amazon, UAW across the South. Labor has the money to support these at scale, but it has to make a decision to do so. And so ultimately, that is the big tension, is that there is still space to do new organizing. We know that it's possible to win even under hard political conditions, but it's not clear whether the labor movement as a whole is going to commit to that approach, or whether it's going to continue what it's been doing for decades now, which is sort of defensively hunkering down in the hope that eventually labor law reform will create space for a new dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a few points you made there that I want to dig into a little bit deeper. And this start with the economic conditions, because that's something that Jacob and I have also just sort of noticed as we've had organizing conversations with folks that, if you've got a crappy job, you can find another crappy job. And, there are people who are, I think, a little bit more enticed to organize right now because they sense that. If their job is not really all that great, they are more likely now than they would have maybe at a previous era to be able to find a replaceable job with comparable wages and benefits. And, so the fear of retaliation maybe isn't quite there. It's still such a huge factor we deal with, but these economic conditions you're talking about, and also something you alluded to would be like the disappointment, right? That there are working people, and I've heard from plenty of them who believe for various reasons that things are going to get easier for them over the next 4 years, right? That prices are going to go down, healthcare will get better. The economy will be booming and jobs will grow. Now, you and I have reasons to be skeptical of that, obviously. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more. Could you just tell me a little bit more about how these economic conditions you think play into these organizing conditions?
Sure. So yeah, there's two sides to this. One is just the general economic context of extreme inequality. This is the basic fundamental dynamic that is sort of driving forward all of the crises of not just the US, but really across the capitalist world, right? It just historic levels of inequality is fueling a lot of anger and sort of very justifiable anger. And that can get channeled in different ways. It can get channeled towards scapegoating. It can get channeled into strongmen, or it can get channeled into sort of collective working class action from below. And so that basic condition is not going to be solved by Trump, no matter what. And not just that, his policies are going to tend to exacerbate that, right? We've already seen in the his appointees or his nominees for his cabinet, this is an administration of billionaires on behalf of billionaires. So the idea that working people's lives are going to get significantly easier and their economic sort of prospects increase is very unlikely under Trump, given the pro-billionaire sort of nature of what he's about to unload. That's part of it. And then exactly like you said, the tight labor market, though, on the other hand, gives workers more confidence to fight back, right? And so we've seen this across the board, it's really remarkable. You see, across the South, for instance, there's been one of the things I found in the research for my book. There's been just wildcats and sort of worker-led strikes across drivers. So a lot of like school bus drivers, different types of drivers, because there's a real shortage of people, particularly in the South, with the license to drive, something like a school bus. So the reality is there's all of these different sectors, retail, logistics, in which the bosses are really they need workers, and workers can sense that. And so that does create a lot of opportunities for organizing. The question is still, are those opportunities going to be seized? Are the unions going to seriously invest in new organizing, or maybe are more left-leaning, bottom-up organizers, workers, going to take the initiative on their own and kind of drag the rest of the union movement along with them?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point, and I wanted to touch on that because, as you said, the labor unions do have money, but it is, to be fair, it's split in various, bank accounts between various international unions and then the local unions and, various formations, right? So it's not like, the $40 billion is all sitting in one account and it could just, be tapped into that easily. So could you talk a little bit about what does that look like in terms of leveraging these resources towards a real concerted effort to organize? What would it take for the unions collectively to kind of all get on board and to make these sort of historic investments?
Yeah, what you said is really important, which it's not just in a bank account, and it's not in the bank account of the AFL-CIO, sort of the National Federation, which actually has, in many ways, the least amount of money and resources compared to the national unions. And then actually most of the money is on the local level. And so we have an extremely decentralized and atomized labor movement in the US, in which the decisions on organizing are predominantly made by all of these autonomous locals. And so that's hard. That's hard to get that whole sort of very messy structure moving in one direction. And it's reasonable for all of these locals to feel like, well, maybe we should sit on whatever, little extra money we have, because, at this point, the most we can do is protect our members. So I don't think it's that people have bad intentions or anything like this, but just structurally, if labor continues to be in a purely defensive mode, we're going to continue to see a decline in union density, and labor's political ability to sort of shape what's going on in the country is going to continue to diminish. So there is a question then of how do you tap these resources? What would that look like? I think we can see some inclination, some instance of what that looks like by what the UAW has done. I think the UAW has provided maybe the best recent example of a union that has spent, I believe, committed over $40 million to new organizing, and has dramatically sort of raised expectations by saying, look, we're going to go and try to organize every major auto plant and battery plant in the South, right? Saying very publicly that we want workers to start self-organizing, but also we're going to put real resources to supporting them. So that is the type of practice that unions on a national and local level could be doing. There is just a question of political will to do that. And that is a bit the tension. There is money, but it's going to take a lot of leaders moving that direction and take a lot of pressure, both from above and from below, to get unions to not just sort of continue with being very risk averse. And unions, unfortunately, are very risk averse, and that doesn't lend itself towards bold organizing most of the time.
Yeah, and I think that last point you made was really important. I wanted to pull that out as well, that if you're listening and you are a rank and file member, you're an officer in your local, a steward in your local, this is a time to act, and this is a time where you can put that pressure from the local level all the way up to the international. This is an opportunity to really use your voice and to be that squeaky wheel in your capacity, whatever that looks like. If you're a union member and you're hearing this and you think, wow, it does really suck that our union density continues to go down year after year after year. We should do something different. We should really go big. I think to your point, it's going to take a lot of leaders all moving in the same direction. And that includes, folks who are listening to this program, folks who are out there, who are grassroots activists, who can make a difference in their local or in their international or, in their labor council, wherever you can, apply pressure and wherever those resources are that could be being used right now to help workers organize and win power. But this just take for a second, this assume that, all the union presidents are listening right now and they're all bought in. Appreciate their support. Glad they listened to the Valley Labor Report. They heard Eric. They're now all buying this argument. They're all in. They're going to invest. So, what would that next step look like? How do you actually organize millions of workers that we're talking about here on this kind of scale?
Right. So that's a great question. And I think one of the mistakes we make in organizing is sometimes underestimating the difference of what it would take to organize millions of workers versus what it takes to win one drive. Because if you're just organizing one drive or two, it doesn't, it's not a major obstacle if you have a very staff intensive model. If you have a good staff organizer, and I think great sort of paid staff organizers are really important, right? And they can help drive forward a local drive. And you can win that way when you're doing small scale organizing. But there's just not enough staff in the country, and there's not enough people we could hire over the next couple of years to become staff to use that kind of staff intensive model, which normally has about one staffer for every 100 workers targeting. That's sort of the norm in organizing, at least for good sort of effective staff intensive organizing. If you're actually trying to organize millions of workers, which is what it would take literally to reverse the decline in union density, then you have to have different models. You have to find ways to give workers tools to start self-organizing, and you still need resources and you still need staff, but you have to do that in a way that's scalable. And by scale, just that means that can spread as widely as necessary. And that's a different type of model than what we saw, for instance, in the 1990s, in which the sort of resource crunch became a major impediment towards scaling up organizing because it costs so much to organize workers. And so fortunately now, partly because of digital tools, partly because there's so many young radicalized workers out there, there's possibilities to do a different type of model. And so think about, for instance, how Starbucks Workers United took off. So this is one of the most important campaigns of the last few years. And it wouldn't have been possible if they had relied on staff to drive it forward. Think about what happened. In Buffalo, they win a union election in November 2021. To their surprise, thousands of workers across the country are inspired. Hundreds of them start reaching out. And if they hadn't pivoted to a worker-to-worker model in which workers do things that staff normally do, they wouldn't have been able to spread so quickly. So what they did, sort of by necessity, is rather than having a staff person train each new shop that reached out, which just wouldn't have been possible because they didn't have enough staff, they've had workers themselves coaching other workers across the country in how to organize and win. So that's different. Most of the time you have a staff organizers coaching every new drive. This time you have workers coaching new drives. So that's a big part of the model. And we've seen that also happening in other unions like the News Guild and to a certain extent UAW. The second piece, I think, of the new model that would make it more scalable and so you could actually organize millions is you have to give workers tools so that they can start self-organizing, right? So that you're not relying on just staff initiation, but that you're encouraging workers to take these first steps. So things like Jane McAlevey, late great Jane McAlevey's done all these massive organizing trainings, with tens of thousands of workers across the US and across the world, teaching them the basics of organizing and saying, go out and do it, right? Unions can and should be doing that. And they can be doing that in conjunction with hiring and encouraging a bunch of SALT. So rather than having a paid full-time staffer, just sort of creating programs in which you could train up thousands of young people in particular to go SALT new strategic workplaces. So that means that they just get a job and try to unionize it. There's all of these ways that you could sort of spur a new approach that isn't as reliant on paid staff. And we are seeing unions already starting to do this to a certain extent, but it's the exception rather than the norm.
Right. And yeah, there was a lot there that you just put out. And one thing that you closed with in terms of salting, that's something that, we're certainly interested in. as labor folks ourselves, like what can we do to build that pipeline given limited resources, right? Like, in our labor council, we don't have a staff. We are all volunteer. And that's, the reality for a lot of organizations, a lot of unions and labor councils and federations. So, that is a way where we can tap into folks. And, something that we didn't talk about in advance, but I know you wrote about this with Red State Revolt and sort of the influence of the, militant minority, so to speak, folks who are more politically minded and engaged, who are, some might say radical or militant, but, these folks who are, by no means the majority, but are kind of a core group of folks, of activists and organizers who seem to be pushing things forward. Could you talk a little bit more about those people and kind of what their role and our role is?
Right. And so, the experience that we can lean on to see what the role of these folks could be. The best experience in the 1930s, where labor's big breakthrough was driven forward by mostly young, pretty militant, sometimes sort of socialist, communist, anarchist, but oftentimes just sort of militant-minded, people who want to fight the boss, workers on the shop floor who took the risks necessary, and it does take personal risks and a lot of time and effort to cohere the rest of their their coworkers. To fight and win. And so the importance of sort of rebuilding a layer of workplace organizers who are very much oriented towards rebuilding a militant labor movement, this is like the crucial thing. And one of the reasons to be optimistic, I think, about the moment we're in is that there is a real radicalization amongst young people across the country in particular. It's not, it's not just young people, but it is disproportionately, after the Great Recession, after things like Bernie Sanders' campaign, there's a lot of people who are, understand that the system isn't working for working people and are looking for ways to change it. Maybe they went to Black Lives Matter protests. And I think one of the exciting things about this moment is more and more people are realizing that unless we rebuild a mass, powerful labor movement, all of the things we want to see changed, not just economic issues, aren't going to be realizable, whether it's around climate change or racial justice, whatever. If you don't have a strong labor movement, we're not going to be able to win progressive change in the US. And so I think that that realization is out there and growing, but we need to find organizational steps to tap that so that, exactly as you mentioned, how can local labor councils, how can local unions have, SALT trainings where you don't actually need a lot of resources. You just need to be able to explain what the process of salting is, give workers some ideas and support for where they could go and salt, right? And then give them some encouragement and some networks so that they can continue that organizing, because you can't really sustain that just as an individual operator. It's really important to have people who are doing similar things, either locally or nationally, who you can sort of who you can commiserate with or strategize with. And so I think then the big sort of tactical challenge for the coming period is, how do we get all of these folks, people like listening to your show and beyond, to take that step? Either it's organizing their own workplace, right? It's not just salting. You can organize your own workplace. And this militant minority, we've already seen it sort of drive forward an organization that I'm part of and spent a lot of time working with, which is EWOC, Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, which basically supports any worker in the country who wants to organize their workplace. And then this is a project of socialists together with United Democratic Socialists of America, together with United Electrical Union, which is one of the most sort of like traditional left-led unions in the country. And so this is the militant minority. These are left-leaning, oftentimes workers and unionists who are trying to support this broad labor resurgence. And so I do think that that layer is both a reason for optimism, because to a certain extent it exists. Labor Notes kind of coheres a lot of this, the Labor Notes Conference, but there's so much more out there. I actually think we're only at the tip of the iceberg for being able to connect all the people who understand that labor is important, but to give them very easy on-ramps to get in and support and be part of leading a resurgent labor movement. And I think that actually the task ahead is to make it easier, because a lot of times people support from the outside and don't realize how much of a role they could be playing if they had sort of an avenue to do so.
Yes, yes, yeah. That really, really resonates with me because I have found the same thing, that I think we are sometimes underestimating how many people do really appreciate this, the importance of a revitalized labor movement to saving this country. I think more and more people are waking up to that. But to your point, we've got to have those on-ramps for people to actually, feel like they are part of this movement and to participate and to show leadership and feel the comfort to take those risks. To know that people will have their back, to know that there's a point behind it, right? Because, and people aren't going to take a risk unless they think there is something real there that makes it worth it. And, especially here in the South, where hostility to unions is so fierce and overwhelming and, broadly supported by not just the entire business establishment, but the political establishment, even often, the religious establishment. It does take some risk to be outside of that. But yeah, I think that's really important. I think what you're saying, it does stick with me, because I think more and more folks are waking up, and I think this, it is up to militant-minded folks who want to see things change. If you do believe that things have got to be better, and you see how labor fits into that, you see how building this labor movement is key to winning everything that we need to have a better life for ourselves and our communities, you do have a role to play. And I think that is something that, is worth emphasizing, is that whatever your capacity, it takes all of us doing what we can to win what we need. And whatever your skills are, whatever your talents, your relationships, you've got something to contribute. So I would just encourage people to think about that and how they fit into this, this broader puzzle. So Eric, tell us a little bit more about where people can find your work and, stay plugged in with these articles you're writing.
Sure. Yeah, I think probably the easiest ways to just sign up for my free newsletter or Substack, which is called Labor Politics. So if you just Google Labor Politics, it should pop up. I put out all my new articles there. And then I have a new book coming out in February, as you mentioned, which is We Are the Union, how worker-to-worker organizing is revitalizing labor. And so, I think those are two things to kind of keep your eye out for. But then just more generally, that, as I mentioned, the main organizing project I'm part of, which I would encourage people out listening, if you're not already sort of familiar, to volunteer for or to lean on if you want support in organizing your workplace, is EWOC, Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. So literally, if any of you want to volunteer for the labor movement and supporting new workers organizing, we will train you up in doing so. And so you can just go to the EWOC website, which is organizeworkers.org. But then also, if you're a worker and you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, now is the time. I've been on the fence, but I think I could try to organize my workplace. EWOC will connect you with an experienced organizer, and will also help you connect eventually with a union once you have an organizing committee and you've taken the first steps. So I think those are the main things I'm involved in these days. And yeah, I hope you all, if you're not already, take this moment to seize what is really a pivotal moment in U.S. history, right? If the labor movement doesn't fight back, certainly I don't think the Democratic Party establishment has any plans at this point, or any vision for how we can overcome what's going on in this country. So I think it's really up to us and incumbent on us to seize the moment.
Oh yeah, thanks, Eric. Great place to leave it. Eric Blanc, I really appreciate you taking some time to spend with us today. Thanks again, and we'll catch up with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, folks. Eric Blanc, and again, his new book is coming out in February, as he said. We Are the Union, How Worker-to-Worker Organizing is Revitalizing Labor and Winning Big. I do encourage folks to check out his Substack and, just follow what he's reading or what he's putting out there. He's one of those folks, much like Hamilton Nolan, that I try to follow pretty regular, just to see, kind of what are the questions that they are posing and the thoughts they're provoking, and whether you always agree with their analysis or not, I think is besides the point of the value of what he is doing and others are doing in this labor media space, because we don't get much coverage in regular media, and I find myself often disappointed inside the labor institutions by how infrequently we're having these sort of big picture conversations. I would like to have these big picture conversations a lot more inside unions. We should be realizing the crisis that we're in, and I don't always see that's being reflected. So I appreciate folks like Eric sounding the alarm, and also just painting the picture of how and why we should go big in our new organizing. So I did tease earlier, we had some big news from UAW, and there was a big announcement. We mentioned it in last week in Southern Labor. And before I tell you a little bit more about it, I do have a clip to share with y'all from the United Auto Workers. So if we could get that queued up, that would be great.
Right here in Glendale, Kentucky, we are building the future of the auto industry.
We work at Blue Oval SK.
We're the workers who will build batteries for Ford. And just like Ford workers, we are standing up for good, safe union jobs. Right now, our pay is too low.
And as battery workers, we work with dangerous chemicals.
Without the right safety equipment or procedures.
We know it doesn't have to be this way. Just last year, right up the road, Ford workers in Louisville stood together and won a record UAW contract.
A contract with life-changing raises, world-class health care,
and a right to a safe job.
Now here at Boss, we're joining together to win our union.
To make sure every worker's voice is heard. From production to quality.
From maintenance to material handling.
Together we're building a new industry from the ground up. And we won't let anybody grind us down. Our work deserves fair pay, safety, and respect.
Because battery workers are auto workers.
And we're building a better future as United Auto Workers.
All right, yeah, big announcement from UAW here in the South, a little bit north of us, up in Kentucky. The BOSK workers are building on the victories of UAW battery workers at Ultium Cells in Lordstown, Ohio, and Spring Hill, Tennessee. Ultium is the joint venture that makes batteries for General Motors' EV fleet. In June, UAW members at Ultium in Lordstown, Ohio, won a contract with the same strong standards that UAW members have at all General Motors facilities. In September, workers at Ultium's new plant in Spring Hill, Tennessee, formed their union and are now preparing to negotiate their union contract. Because BOSK is currently a non-union facility, workers there have pay, benefit, and safety standards much weaker than those of UAW members at Ford. Starting pay for a BOSK production worker is just $21 an hour, and compare that to UAW production workers at Ford, who start at $26.32, and after 3 years will make over $42 an hour. So, pretty clear why workers at BOSK are organizing with UAW. They would love to see, the same wages and benefits and safety standards that their colleagues in Ford have already won through the UAW. So BOSK workers are joining together to ensure that they achieve UAW auto worker standards. The movement led by BOSK and Ultium workers is setting strong standards for the rapidly expanding EV battery industry. A recent study found that manufacturers have announced nearly 90,000 current or future jobs in the EV battery industry, linked to more than $100 billion in investments over the last 9 years. So this is a big industry, a growing industry, and it's really important that organized labor be there. The growing movement among non-union battery workers across the country, and especially in the South, builds off the success of the UAW stand-up strike at the Big Three and the victory by Volkswagen workers in Chattanooga, Tennessee, who became the first Southern auto workers outside the Big Three to win their union when they voted to join UAW in April. And I do recommend folks check out the coverage on Labor Notes of this new campaign. Our friend of the show, Luis Leon, you can check out his article, Kentucky Battery Plant Workers Launch Union Drive with UAW. Just to quote here from the article a little bit. The Battery Park, a joint venture between Ford and South Korea's SK On, is expected to ramp up hiring to 5,000 hourly workers by 2030. It has twin battery plants, but the second one is on hold due to low demand for electric vehicles. At the first plant, workers are testing battery module packs from facilities in Georgia as the plant prepares to become fully operational next year. Since he started last year, Chad Johnson has seen coworkers suffer mild heart attacks and respiratory problems, apparently from exposure to chemicals. He has seen workers carried out on stretchers with broken pelvises from tripping on exposed wiring because they are working in what is still an active construction site. The organizing, quote, has moved more quickly than expected, said Johnson, a quality control technician and former UAW Local 3047 member at nearby Ford Supplier. There were originally 6 of us. That grew to about 15. Now there's an organizing committee of about 70. Moving on, Governor Andy Beshear in the article says, quote, I am a pro-union governor and always will be. My hope is the companies that are involved will stay neutral and let this be a true decision of the employees. Wow. Very different from what we heard from many Southern governors this year, including Alabama's Governor Kay Ivey, who basically told us unions were the devil, Yankee Devils, and were bad for us. Very bad for Alabama values. So kudos to Governor Andy Beshear for calling for neutrality. It's a welcome move. And wrapping up here with the article from Labor Notes, again, this is from Luis Leon. Haley Hadfield was one of the original 6 workers who spoke with a UAW regional director. Then she began holding meetings in her living room. Hadfield had been a member of the Communication Workers Industrial Division, IUE-CWA, for 4 years at General Electric, where she built appliances. She applied at Blue Oval because the company was promoting that it offered free health insurance and other perks, including cell phones and computers, plus a starting rate of $21 an hour. The company later withdrew the offer of free health care, a sore point for workers who were drawn to the job for that reason. A month in, Hadfield became concerned when the company sent new hires to train in a school infested with bats. The bat colony had roosted in the elevator shaft of this decommissioned middle school, she said, and we didn't really have much choice but to be exposed to their guano and their droppings, and it started to make a lot of people physically ill. Once they started training on-site while the plant was still under construction, Hadfield and her coworkers really started getting to know each other and talking about their shared issues at work. Meanwhile, the safety problems at the Blue Oval site had begun before factory workers even got there. Since construction started in 2022, the workers building the complex have been raising safety concerns, including mold and respiratory illnesses among electrical workers. The company recently quarantined a whole building, and workers say it is finally tearing out the whole HVAC for mold. One of the fears is exposure to cathode and anode powder. I probably mispronounced those. I'm just a simple country boy struggling with some big words. But these are hazards that can include chemical leaks, electric shocks, explosions, and fires. So these powders are used to make paste that is applied to different foils that we use to pull together and create our battery pouches, Hadfield explained. If you look at an Energizer battery, you'll see a plus and a minus sign on opposite sides of that battery. Within that battery itself would also be tiny little bits of cathode and anode powder. The batteries that auto workers manufacture are made of lithium-ion electric chemical cells. Each cell has 2 electrodes, a positively charged containing lithium and a negatively charged typically made of graphite. The cathode usually contains nickel, manganese, and cobalt oxides. So, shout out to the workers in Kentucky for organizing amidst these safety issues, in particular, false promises. That's the reality, folks, is that workers will always be put in jeopardy. Our safety doesn't mean squat to the bosses or the politicians. We have to organize to look out for one another. So shout out to the workers here in Kentucky organizing with UAW. And I think it's really important to see the union drive continue in this EV battery field. It's a growing industry, as I shared. It's going to be, more and more jobs, particularly here in the South. And, these companies go to the South for a reason. They go to the South because they know they can get away with lower wages. They know that the politicians will be lined up against the unions. They know that they can get away with hardly any regulations, right? They can trash the environment. They don't have to worry about safety. That's why they come here, right? As our brother Jeremy with the UAW said about Mercedes, the Alabama discount. That's what they're looking for. That's why they come down to the South. And so it's really, really exciting to see UAW organize these workers. They have a supermajority signed up, so we'll see. The company could sign right now voluntary recognition. They could go ahead and recognize them. My guess is they probably won't, and they will probably force this to an NLRB election, which, we'll see what happens. Stay tuned. Hopefully the company will not commit any sort of union busting, but, especially with the governor speaking out. So something to keep our eye on for sure, but a big, big campaign happening here in the South. So in political updates, Jacob did want me to share a little bit about the Attorney General pick. So listeners are probably aware that Matt Gaetz was picked to be Attorney General. He is now out. Now, I'm no expert on the guy or his record or anything like that, but word on the street is he's kind of a sex pest. That's what people say to me. I'm just reporting what people are saying. I can't swear that he is a sex pest. I haven't seen it myself, but that's what people in the streets are saying. And apparently enough folks in Congress bought that too. He is out. Pam Bondi has been tapped for the job. And she was Attorney General of Florida for a time. And since Florida does not have a Department of Labor, the Attorney General is the only official authorized to enforce the state minimum wage, which is slightly higher than the national minimum wage. Under her tenure as Florida's Attorney General, she took no enforcement action against companies for breaking the state's minimum wage, which, as I said, is a little bit higher than the federal minimum. And that's despite federal data showing that companies routinely violated the federal minimum wage, which automatically then defied the state minimum wage, right? If they're paying less than the federal minimum, they're damn sure paying less than the Florida minimum. But during her time, she never did do any enforcement on that. There was an article from The Nation magazine a while back. Let's see. This is actually a little bit older article from July of 2016. Florida has not held an employer responsible for violating the minimum wage since 2011. Right. So I wanted to pull a couple excerpts from this article. It's worth highlighting. In March of 2014, a nail salon worker in Florida filed a complaint against her boss with the office of the state's Republican Attorney General, Pam Bondi. The salon worker, who wished to remain anonymous in this article for fear of retaliation by her former employer, told the reporter that she had started at the salon the previous November, and that in addition to a variety of workplace abuses, her boss refused to pay his employees the state's minimum wage, which was then $7.93 an hour. In her complaint to Bondi's office, the worker described an alarming set of alleged offenses. Quote, they make us work a minimum of 40 hours a week and sometimes remove our rights for breaks, yet only pay straight commission, said the workers' complaint, which was submitted to Bondi's office by email. Quote, there are weeks where some of us have had to work 45 hours plus and only had a check for $10 to $50. They threaten if we even ask about minimum wage. The complaint added that, quote, many of the girls are scared to say the wrong thing, yet don't have enough money to feed their families. The salon employee, who, along with her husband, was working to raise an autistic child, hoped that Bondi's office would help her get the money that she was owed for her months of salon work. But the worker heard nothing from Bondi's office in response to the complaint, even after multiple follow-ups. Quote, I made 2 or 3 calls, and after a few months passed, I assumed they weren't going to do anything, the worker told me, so I dropped it. To the salon worker, who estimated she was owed some $2,000 in back wages for several months of work, Florida's top cop for labor violations appeared to be off duty. Pam Bondi is a politician who has voiced fierce opposition to strong minimum wage laws and has close ties to organizations that have aggressively lobbied against laws to protect workers from theft. In 2013, she declined to sue Trump University for fraudulent business practices after personally soliciting and securing a hefty political contribution from Trump himself. According to the records obtained by The Nation, workers have filed more than 36 complaints with Bondi's office during the past couple years. The grievances range from employees expressing concern that their bosses are getting away with skimming a few cents an hour off their minimum wage paychecks, to workers flagging a variety of severe workplace abuses. Please don't let anyone else go through what I endured, said one complaint, in which a worker alleged sexual harassment and highly unsanitary conditions in a restaurant kitchen. She also believed her co-workers were being underpaid. It was awful, she said. Despite such complaints, Bondi's public comments have given the impression that wage theft in Florida is not a problem in need of robust solutions. In a statement provided to the reporter in February for a separate article, Bondi's office did not respond to more than a dozen requests for comment on this particular story. A spokesperson for the office seemed to suggest that wage theft is a minor issue, with the bulk of claims coming from workers being paid mere cents below the minimum wage. And most, the spokesperson suggested, can simply be fixed by giving employers reminders to comply with the law. Brian Martinez, who worked as a waiter in St. Petersburg, recently got a first-hand taste of Bondi's soft approach to wage and hour enforcement. In early April of last year, Martinez began work at an upscale restaurant in the city's downtown area, where he says he was paid just $4.91 an hour with no tips, significantly below the state and federal minimum wage during his first 7 days of training. Then for weeks, Martinez's boss heavily skimmed off the tips earned by him and the other waiters, Martinez said. After a period of several weeks, Martinez estimates that he was owed approximately $1,000 in unpaid wages. Once I found out that he was taking money out of my paycheck, I confronted him, Martinez recalls, and he told me that if I didn't like it, I could get another job. So Martinez decided to turn to Florida's top lawyer for help. Quote, I thought that they were going to get my money back, Martinez told the reporter. I assumed that they were going to do everything they could to make it right. In mid-May of last year, Martinez filed his complaint with Bondi's office. Someone needs to investigate this guy and his books because he is stealing from his employees and getting free labor, Martinez's complaint read. Please help me get what I'm owed and every other employee's what they're owed. It's unfair to myself and everyone there. I have all paid stubs for future reference if needed. Thank you, and I'll look forward to hearing from someone soon. Martinez says that an investigator from Bondi's office did get in touch with him and that the two had a few phone conversations and exchanged approximately 20 emails. The investigator also appeared to have placed a call to his employer, which, he says, seems to have prompted his boss to offer him a settlement check. Yet the back wages that his boss was providing in the check disappointed Martinez, to say the least. The sum his boss the sum that his boss offered, Martinez says, amounted to $10.54, a check he declined to deposit. I thought it was pretty comical, to be honest, Martinez said. After he continued to inquire with the Attorney General's office, Martinez said the state agency lost interest in his case. I tried to reach out a few times to ask, have you heard anything? Is there anything happening with this? Martinez recalls. And there was no response at all. I have no idea what was going on with the state. So, wanted to share that about Pam Bondi, since she is in the news. She is someone we're going to be hearing more and more about. Gotta say, not impressed with her wage enforcement in Florida. You asking me to believe there was not a single minimum wage violation in the state? Okay. Continuing on with some federal politicians, this is certainly relevant to a lot of our government employees, members of AFGE and IFPTE and others. Texas Senator John Cornyn, he said that requiring federal employees to come to the office 5 days a week would result in a wave of voluntary terminations that we welcome. If federal employees don't want to show up, American taxpayers shouldn't pay them for the COVID-era privilege of staying home. Interesting. So, Senator from Texas, John Cornyn, wants all federal employees to come to the office 5 days a week. He believes a lot of people would quit because they don't want to show up, quote unquote. Meanwhile, just out of curiosity, we looked at his attendance. Senator John Cornyn, since you think people don't want to show up to work, how often do you show up to work as a senator? Well, it turns out he was the 19th most absent in votes compared to all other senators. So there were 81 people better than him at showing up to work. He missed over 6% of his votes. So we wanted to share that. Just thought that was interesting. Personally, I don't think we should force everyone back to the office if it's not necessary. And I don't think it's necessary, right? A lot of folks can work effectively from home or in hybrid situations. And it's not always cost effective to force people back to the office, which is what a lot of folks have learned. Now, I recognize that the real estate industry really wants people to go back to the office. But, we just thought that was interesting, that this senator complaining about federal employees not showing up to work. But turns out he doesn't always show up to work himself. And as we are getting ready to wrap up some things today, I wanted to share this voicemail that we got. Just a reminder that you can leave a voicemail throughout the week, 844-899-TVLR. If you have anything you want to share, if there's anything that stood out about the episode, if you have anything you want to rant and rave about, anything grinding your gears, or if you've got a bad boss story, you've got an organizing win, something cool happening with your union, definitely leave us a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR. And like I mentioned at the top of the show today, feel free to use a fake name. Nobody's going to stop you, right? I don't need to know your legal name in exchange for you leaving a voicemail on the Valley Labor Report. You're welcome to use a fake name if that makes you feel more comfortable. Of course, don't want you to dox yourself. Don't want you to give away any identifying information if you are actively organizing at your workplace. Don't tell us something you shouldn't. But we'd love to hear stories from listeners. And we did get a call from Colorado, and I wanted to play this voicemail for you.
Hey, I'm just calling from Colorado to tell you thanks for putting on a great show and representing the letter carriers. I would donate, but I'm a letter carrier, so I don't have any money. But thanks so much. See ya.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Again, love the voicemails. Y'all keep them coming. Appreciate all the folks who've been participating in the chat as well. We've had some robust discussion, it looks like, about lots of politics stuff. What else? And yeah, I really appreciate all the folks who have been supporting the fundraiser. Won't go on about that anymore beyond just reminding you tvlr.fm /union 2024. That's where you can check and find out if we have made it to our goal. Our goal is $10,000. We're hoping to raise that by the end of tonight. We are about 78% of the way there. So if you can help us get across the finish line, we sure would appreciate it. And I wanted to finish things up today by just talking about some ways that folks can get involved. And, both whether you're listening locally or, from wherever you're listening, something that I would encourage is if you are currently in a union, please do get more involved in the union. If you don't have a union, think about how you could have one. You should really consider organizing with your coworkers. It is a life-changing experience and a way to build power and really make a difference. I do want to encourage folks to get involved with their local labor councils. Jacob and I talk about the labor councils pretty regularly on this show because we think there's a lot of potential there, right? When you have a union of unions, when you have unions come together and collaborate, and workers from various industries coming together in the same space, it can be really powerful. I know at the North Alabama Area Labor Council, we have everybody from, rocket scientists and engineers to iron workers and laborers, and everything in between. So it's really a powerful space with a lot of potential. A lot of these labor councils are sleepy. They, could use some revitalization. They could use some fresh energy, some fresh activism. And if you are someone who, for various reasons, maybe you're looking on the outside of the labor movement and wondering how you fit in, we need community allies. We need faith allies. We need nonprofit allies. We need people who, can leverage their networks and relationships and resources to really support working class folks when we take a stand for our rights and for our interest. So there is a way for you to fit in. I definitely believe that. Also, just want to encourage folks to continue their training. Labornotes.org is a great place to check out training. I wanted to mention some of the events that they have coming up. On December 10th, they have their great workshop, What to Do When Your Union Breaks Your Heart. I know we've heard from some letter carriers pretty frequently over the last few weeks. I know many of you are experiencing some heartbreak inside your union or with leaders inside your union. So do recommend that workshop. It is 7:30 Eastern, December 10th, What to Do When Your Union Breaks Your Heart. On December 12th at 5 p.m. Central, they have Thinking Like an Organizer. This is their stewards workshop, so mostly geared towards stewards and elected officers, but to help you think like an organizer as you do the work. And I think that's really important. It's easy to kind of get trapped in just the day-to-day grind of handling grievances and individual member issues and forget about how it all really connects together as part of an organizing puzzle. I know Labor Notes did have a call recently on November 20th, a national call, Beating the Billionaires in 2025. I was not able to make that. So if anyone did attend that, I would love to hear more about how that went. If you did attend, leave us a voicemail. Leave us a voicemail. Tell us how it went. I would love to know that. On the last couple things I wanted to let our local folks know that we will be having, we had the North Alabama Area Labor Council happy hour this past week. Just so you know, especially those of you I'm talking about who are more on the community side of things, Every other month, our Labor Council will have, a social type gathering like that, like a happy hour, where folks are welcome to attend, whether you're a union member or just an ally. We'll have our business meeting in December. So if you're a union member in North Alabama, definitely check that out. You can go to our Facebook page and find out more. Also for Alabamians, I am working with Alabama Arise to organize a virtual meeting, and this will be on December 12th. And that evening, it will be a legislative preview. We'll be looking at some of the issues we'll be working on in 2025, advocating for poor and working class folks here in the state, and some of the threats and opportunities that we, see potentially in the 2025 legislative session, and how you can get involved. So if you are local, we are always looking for folks who are willing to contact their lawmakers and serve on legislative contact teams. If you're willing to meet with your legislator, if you're willing to make a phone call every now and then, stay in touch with them via email, and kind of keep us in the loop on how that's going, please do let us know. We would love to have that help. It's really powerful when diverse union folks and our allies are able to speak to lawmakers and to pressure them on the issues relevant to us. No, we're not always going to win, but I can assure you that the other side is doing a hell of a lot of advocacy and a hell of a lot of lobbying. And I know personally, I don't want my lawmakers to only hear from cranks and corporate lobbyists. I want to be sure they've heard from me and from working class folks. They may not listen, but they're going to hear from us. So those are some ways that I do encourage folks to get this movement going. I really appreciate all the support that we've had. Again, today is a little different. I've been holding it down myself, and this is not normally my role in the show, so I appreciate all the support and the patience today. Again, 844-899-TVLR. That's our number. If you want to leave us a voicemail throughout the week, you can follow us at tvlr.fm. And again, that is tvlr.fm/union2024 for our fundraiser. We are almost at our goal. We would love to grow and expand this project, get on more radio stations, talk about unions, talk about labor solidarity, people power, collective action, and spread that message throughout the South. If you've got any connections at radio stations, please do hit us up. And that's all I've got for y'all this weekend. Thanks so much for your support. And stay tuned next week. We will have all new episode next Saturday, live at 9:30. And thanks again for your support. Really, really appreciate everyone who tuned in today, everyone who liked and shared and subscribed. It all helps. It all makes a difference. So we'll catch you next week. Solidarity forever, y'all.